Hey guys, Yura here, and today I want to talk about one particular property of watercolor, and that is transparency. So that is really useful when you want to paint really nice layered still lifes or anything else that actually requires layering, because with each layer you will lose some transparency, and it's important to know your paints. So this is what we are going to be talking about. For this I will show you how I take care of new palettes, new colors. The main thing is I do paint swatches, I do tests for the paints, and you can find them really useful, and I'll show you a really nice way to do it and have it handy. So I'll have these 4 pieces of paper, and I will have them attached with a key ring or something. I actually couldn't find key rings, so I'll have this plastic thing and I'll have it like this. I'll make holes in here in the corners, and what we want to do is we want to have all the paints represented on these pieces of watercolor paper. So I decided to make it this way. So I'll have on separate pieces of paper orange, red, I think red and green, then all the blues including violet or purple, and then all the browns and dark gray, things like that. So I have to use permanent marker, permanent black, and I'll use this micron pen to write down the names of the paints just in case, and so I know which one is which. This paint set is a Sonnet paints made in St. Petersburg, Russia, but it doesn't really matter. You want to check your paints for opacity, and also I will have these paints check for staining. So that's really important for my way of painting, for my style, and what I actually love doing. So I need to know these properties and I need to be aware of them. And according to the test I'll make here, I'll use some paints more often and not use others, maybe ever. Maybe I'll just use them for gouache paintings. This set has a nice professional property also represented here. I'm not sure whether you can see it or not. Let's see here. Yeah, so you see there's 3 stars, 2 stars, and 1 star next to some paints, and this basically means high light fastness, medium light fastness, or low light fastness. So as I understand it, this is indicative of how long will your watercolor painting stay the same as you painted on the sunlight, meaning because the watercolors are diluted with water, they do lose their brightness and some properties when they're already in the frame, maybe under the glass or things like that, and they lose their brightness and the quality of painting diminishes with time. So these 3-star paints are the best for serious work, for maybe your commissions and things like that. So I have to keep that in mind, and I'll keep this properties, I'll note them down next to these test paints too. So this is the plan, and I hope you enjoy it. And this is really helpful if you do commissions and if you want your work to stay the same as when you just painted. Okay, let's do the work. The last thing I want to do is check for staining. So I wet my brush and I dab it on the towel, and then I just make a little, try to take out some paint. And this is important for me as an artist because I love painting wet on wet, and I use this technique quite often to get particular results when I'm painting flowers and furry animals. So I need to know how the paints behave, and it's also not as straightforward as you might think. Again, for example, I would think that this gold ochre is less transparent and more staining, but you see the white of the paper is coming out quite nicely even after the paint was dried. And when I did this sort of, you can fix things like this. You can fix some highlights like this. You see the paint is already dry, but you go back there and try to lift it up. This orange is really staining. See, the paper is more orange. You can also sort of check the paper, test the paper with this paint test. For example, you can see how the paint is behaving when lifted, right? And you can see that the paper is getting more or less damaged. Of course, if you don't have access to the best paper on the market, like let's say Arches 300 pounds, and 300 grams and 140 pounds, or Watercolor, then you have to know your paper too. Another thing I have to know is which paints, which primary colors I can mix without getting dirty results. And this is the next thing I'm gonna do with this palette. I'm gonna check all the yellows with all the reds and all the blues. So it's done, folks. Here's what I have, and now how to use this kind of thing. We have the transparency test here, and it's all about whether the paint that you put on top of the permanent marker mark, whether it's visible on top or as if it's underneath the permanent marker. So the more it's visible on top, the less transparent it is. And you understand, right? Because we use water with watercolor, it's already diluted. And if this yellow diluted with water is visible on top of this black strip, that means it's not that transparent. And when you are going to use it with layering, like for example, maybe you'll want to paint nice still life, flowers or some fruit. If this is going to be your most transparent layer, then it's not going to give you that really nice bright color effect. So you might want to look for another yellow. Next, this test here is the staining test, and this is used in the terms of how much white is visible after you try to lift it up when the paint was already dry. So you can see this gold ochre is really darker paint, but it's less staining than this yellow deep. You can kind of see that there's more of this pigment stayed here than here. And in fact, this gold ochre is the most transparent from all these paints. So there is most probably a correlation between transparency and staining. These marks here are the manufacturer properties that they give us on their product. They say that the more stars there are on their paints, the longer they stay unwithered. So the longer you're painting using these paints will stay as it was after you completed the painting. So it's not gonna get duller with time, or it will as any other paint, but it will take longer. Yeah, I'll just have this thing and go through this to remember what I'm working with, to see whether I want to use this or that paint for layering for my works. For example, I wouldn't want to mix in this English red in my works unless I want that part of the painting to be kind of opaque, then I can use this. But if I want this beautiful watercolor transparency, then I want to avoid these opaque paints like this one too. This sap green looks really light and bright, but it is more visible on top of the permanent marker than this darker one. So this is something to have in mind, and it's quite helpful. The blue paints all look as if they're underneath the black strip of permanent marker, so they are really nice. And yeah, they're really nice to use to have your painting, life of your painting longer, because the manufacturer says these are the paints that stay as bright as they are for longer. And of course, it's harder to tell the transparency with darker paints, but This raw sienna is really nicely transparent. Burnt sienna too, burnt umber, they're really nicely transparent. Alrighty. Next thing I will do is I will have all my primary colors mixed one by one. So I will have these 3 yellows mixed with these 3 reds to see what kind of orange they give me. And I will mark those, maybe I'll have them here, and I will mark those that I like, the combinations, and I will try to stick to those, because some combinations of primaries will give you muddy colors, muddy secondary colors, and I don't want that. And when you work with new set of paints, you want to know your paint. This is why we do it. So what I want to do now is I want to mix my secondary colors from all the primaries I have here, meaning I'll have all the combinations. For example, I will have on this sheet, I will have paint number 1 mixed with 456, paint number 2 with 456, paint number 3 with 456. Then I will have paint number 4 mixed with 789, 5 with 789, and 6 with 789. And then I will have my yellows with blues. And these 3 pieces of paper at the back of the paper. So now I look at these and I decide which primaries I want to use for mixing secondaries and which ones I don't want to use for mixing secondaries. I will use a pencil. I don't want to use number 6 for mixing orange, so I'll just put minus here and here. Yep. So I'll put a plus on top of the mixes that I like. And I'll just, I use this thought process of elimination in other areas of my life too. I eliminate things that I definitely don't want first. So this is one, these are no good either, and this one. The same here. Oh, these two for sure. The greens are the green is the kind of color that, it has many usages, and sometimes the color seems not as green as you might want it, but it has some usage in painting landscapes. So I'll leave these here and I'll just remember which ones. I'll have it here, not remember, but I'll have it here to see what green it gives me. But I also don't really like this hue. This one is better. Yep, and this one is muddy. Well, I put minus here because now I'm using the criteria of muddiness. The best green I have is here, and here. This one is okay, this one is not good. This one is kind of muddy, but it has its usages. And now for the purple. You see, the purple, I noticed that some pigments don't even give you a proper purple. So it's hard to see how purple things are. I'll show you in my other sketchbook. Like here, I used acrylic, and you see, even with acrylic, it's not really the purple you have. It's sort of a mixture of just not good of a color, not good of a purple. And I checked the acrylic the same way. And I have some other colors here. Like this is a good purple, but this is just mud. And the same here, it looks okay purple, but this one is still better. I really like this one and this one. And this one is no good. It gives you really dark color, most probably because this is more like indigo blue and this is close to purple, so they just mix into a darker purple. This one is no good at all. It gives you a really muddy color. And this one too. So yeah, maybe this one is okay. And then I just write down the combinations I like, and I figure out whether there is one set of primaries that gives me really nice all secondaries.